Okay, so we are going to carry on with part one. This is part three on my end, but part one on the end of Cornerstone Church and their origins and evolution uh, discussion, if you will. Right now, it's just a bunch of guys sitting around with a very poorly put together and distracting PowerPoint. Well, yeah, it's still PowerPoint, even though it's on a Mac. Presentation about the Earth. So quick recap: we got from fucking um, Big Bang. Did the universe have a creator? In a cause, and is the universe infinite? And is infinite the same thing as eternal? And yeah, fun stuff. So let's see if in one or two more parts we can finish their part one, so we can move on to part two. That's probably going to be more in my wheelhouse because it's biology based. So at least that's what I'm assuming. So let's get this going.
Not something that he necessarily is controlled by. We're controlled by time. We can't stop.
I don't know if that's correct. I've never thought of it that way. That doesn't mean it's incorrect, but give me a second. Water. We're subject to the passage of time, but I don't know if I'd say we're controlled by it.
Stop it. We can't slow it down, right? We can't reverse it. We can't speed it up. But God is all-powerful and outside of time, and therefore time doesn't actually have an impact on him. It doesn't control him. He's not beholden to it. So I actually like this explanation of this timelessness, the timelessness of God essentially existing outside of time and being able to see all things all at once.
In a simplistic sense, like anybody who builds something or makes something is a creator, even a house.
Yes.
The house is bound by the design.
What is that? Like, is somebody spinning around in a really rusty chair?
That the builder gave it, and it can't go beyond that designer realm. But obviously the one who built it is free to, go way beyond its limits or its bounds.
Absolutely.
Very simplistic, but...
And time being sort of a fourth dimension for us, right, is something that we're bound by, but God being the creator of isn't bound by it.
So does that mean that God is the fifth dimension?
So it really comes down to a quantitative versus qualitative difference. So God is an infinite being, but not a composition of an infinite number of things, right? So that is to say, he is not eternal in the temporal sense, but he is outside.
Okay, eternal only makes sense in a context of time, okay? Eternal has to do with time.
Outside of time and the creator of time.
Well, Matt, it's often been said that he created time in Genesis 4. God separated light versus darkness, and that.
What, do you think that the light and the dark are the only mediators of the passage of time? That would be really, really strange. Because the day has a certain number of hours to it, and then the night has a certain number of hours to it. And you can have time passage in the absence of light.
That was time.
Yeah.
That started the beginning of that.
Yeah, when he created night, yeah. Mm-hmm. So there's another argument for the creation of the universe, and it's called the fine-tuning argument.
Oh boy, okay. Can't wait to hear this one.
Now this goes really deep, but I'm going to show you a quick video about the fine-tuning argument.
Can't you just, never mind, just go.
And then we're going to actually talk about some of the fine-tuned parameters of our universe. So there's an agreement in the scientific community that the universe and the conditions of the early universe were exquisitely fine-tuned. That's a quote.
You know how, like, a puddle conforms to the shape of of the hole it's in? That doesn't mean that the hole was built for the puddle.
And the question is why? As Christians, we believe we know why. We believe that God is the creator and he created it with man in mind, with our form of life.
Um, so if it was really created, and, like, I get that, like, so let's say I'm building something, and I'm building something from scratch. Maybe I'm building, just a structure of some sort. And I can decide the dimensions of that structure. I can decide the material the structure is made out of. And if there's, no particular purpose of this structure, maybe it's an art piece. And now, I'm not an artist. I don't really make things just for the sake of making them. But let's just pretend that I'm making a sculpture. I can make that, I have creative liberties to make that sculpture how I want to. Now, at the end of the process, I will eventually settle on a particular set of parameters for that sculpture. I'm going to have, maybe the sculpture's, um, I'm just trying to think of something that's a little bit more family friendly than what came to mind at first. Um, Maybe the sculpture is a moth sculpture, and I want it to be really weird, and so I make it out of, like, dried noodles with, like, Elmer's glue and fucking modeling clay and other stuff, with, like, feathers sticking off of it, and I have some creative liberties, and my question is, if God's the creator, he could have made us as well as the earth and the universe we live within any way he wanted to. And I want to know why he settled on the particular parameters, like the boiling point of water being what it is, the specific heat capacity of different chemicals, the fact that our bodies are made of how, the different percentages of the different elements, the distance of the Earth from the Sun, and, the hundreds of millions of other little tiny things that happen to be the parameters of the universe. What was God's reasoning behind settling on those specific factors? Because remember, he created us. Not, in this argument, he created us. And so if that's the case, why on earth, it's not like he designed us and then said, well, this organism needs to exist at these temperatures, and because of that, I'm going to make the earth this distance from the sun. In order for the Earth to stay at this particular temperature, which most of the Earth doesn't stay at a particular temperature, but you know, and like the sun is a certain size that dictates the Earth be a certain distance away from it. And if the sun was a different size than what it would have to mean the Earth would be at a different distance. So like all of these parameters do make me wonder, you know, what kind of thought processes God went through.
In mind, and that is why the universe has been fine-tuned to support us, right? The reason that our solar system is where it is in the Milky Way galaxy.
We don't really know if that has any bearing on whether or not Earth will be able to sustain us. Um, think of the galaxy as like a terrarium, and you have like some soil and some like snails and things in the terrarium, and all throughout that terrarium, those snails could potentially exist. Now they're only going to exist in a small subset of the terrarium at any given time, um, and the entire terrarium is still suitable for them to live within. We don't know if the Milky Way galaxy is like that. We don't know, I mean, at least I don't know enough about the Milky Way galaxy. But my question is then, you know, why has, first of all, why have humans been unable to exist in the majority of the planet? The majority of the planet is covered in salt water. We don't have gills. We can't drink the salt water. Most of the stuff in the oceans could kill us. and we can't eat it. And for the majority of the Earth's history, we haven't even been on the planet. Most places you live, you have to wear, really warm clothes or go into an air-conditioned building so you don't fucking die of exposure. It doesn't really seem like the Earth was meant to have us on it.
It happens to be kind of out on a radial arm of the Milky Way galaxy where there's not too much there's not too much radiation. There's not too much.
Do you know how much radiation the Earth gets bombarded with by the sun on a daily basis? If it weren't for the ozone layer and our DNA repair mechanisms and protective pigments in our skin, we would be fucking toast.
Activity happening that could, impact our planet. There are a number of things that have to be just right for us to survive.
Define just right, because the parameters of the Earth, including its distance from the sun, vary quite a bit. So Earth's travel around the sun in a slightly oval-shaped pattern. Therefore, the Earth's distance from the sun changes throughout the year. So the Earth ranges between 91.4 and 94.5 million miles from the sun. So, no, leave me alone. That's like, 3 million miles. That's a lot of distance.
And for us to exist at all. And so we believe that that's because the creator of the universe, God, has actually monkeyed with the numbers, right? He's the one that.
I mean, he was the one that set up the numbers in the first place and the requirements for things to be as precise as they allegedly are.
That set up the laws the way they are, the physical laws the way they are, so that we could, exist in this universe.
I'm sure that there is life. I mean, there's probably life on other planets, but I'm sure that, if there was going to be life on Earth, it could have developed under different conditions just fine. It wouldn't look the same. It wouldn't be us. Or maybe there would be a version of us. We're just not really sure. But you do realize that a lot of the processes of our bodies that have specific, ranges and values are that way because of the way that our conditions on the Earth and the universe in general are. So if the conditions on the universe and, the Earth were different, it's very likely that, maybe we would need more or less water to sustain ourselves. Maybe our bodies would be made up of a greater proportion of, nitrogen or something, along those lines, where we still exist, and we don't know.
So, some people believe, though, that that is not the case. They believe in the appearance of design, right?
Yes.
Right? And that things just are what they are. And part of the problem that they have is around the probabilities of why our universe exists the way that it does, and the likelihood that our universe would be one that would spring up.
Those are two things that we can't really calculate the probability of. And so it's kind of a moot point.
And so one of the things that they use to try and combat this is multiverse theory. And the multiverse.
I've never heard anybody combat the argument for the fine-tuning argument with the multiverse theory. It's probably a hypothesis anyway. It can't really be proven or disproven, but I think that it is more than likely correct. But that's just my opinion. But I've never heard any counter apologetics, or really anybody in general, use the multiverse idea to refute fine tuning.
Isn't provable. It's a belief in faith as much as belief in God.
Projection into cocaine fallacy.
God is, but the multiverse also would require a cause. There'd have to be a multiverse engine.
So would your God.
And this video is actually going to talk a little bit about that as well. So we'll play the video, and then after playing the video, actually, you know what? I'm going to go through some of the fine-tune arguments, and then I'll play the video where you'll see some of those same arguments. So first, I wanted to talk about a
Just learn how to use fucking PowerPoint.
particular law that we all recognize, and that is
Gravity. I'm trying to think. Is gravity really a law? Gravity's a theory.
this. Everyone recognizes that, right?
Gravitational.
This is the gravitational, this is the law of gravity. So this is essentially an equation. So the G over there is the gravitational force, the
Yes. Universal constant.
universal gravitational force. And if you look at the equation on the left, what this is talking about is the actual force of gravity. F is the force of gravity equals the gravitational constant multiplied by
the mass of the two objects in question. So, the gravity between me and this cell phone. You would take my weight in kilograms, the cell phone's weight in kilograms, multiply those, and then you would go ahead and measure the distance between the center of the cell phone and the center of me, wherever the hell that is. You would square that, divide my mass times this. You get the point.
M1 and M2, which are the two bodies that are acting on one another, over R, which is the distance between those two bodies.
The centers of those two bodies.
And so this is how you can calculate the force of gravity of the moon and the Earth on one another based off of this gravitational constant.
Based on.
Now, this universal gravitational constant is the thing that is finely tuned, right?
Again, it could have been any value. Okay? And, I don't know necessarily where this particular constant plays into anything biological. I'm sure it does, but it's not really something we concern ourselves with in biology because it is a constant. But I think that he's getting too caught up on, this fine-tuning shit just sounds more like, well, stuff has specific values, therefore God. And it's like, stuff has specific values, therefore gremlins. I mean, come on.
Right?
Do better.
So, at the very beginning of the universe, if we were going to take on face value the whole Big Bang theory, right? So, at the very beginning of the Big Bang, there were a number of parameters that were very finely tuned to allow for the existence of the universe. So if you take it on face value, forget about where the singularity came from, there was a Big Bang, there were a lot of things that could have happened. If this gravitational force were slightly stronger, just infinitesimally smaller, if it were...
Don't you mean bigger? Wait, let me just think. Yeah, this would have to be bigger to have a greater gravitational force because you're multiplying this by this number.
A tiny fraction of a percent, then the galaxy wouldn't exist, or the universe would.
That's what I thought. How do you know that? What is making you assert that? I don't know if anybody actually asserts that.
Exists. If the gravitational constant were 1/100000th of a gram heavier or lighter,
Where are you getting these numbers from? Are you just pulling them out of your fat ass?
then stars or galaxies wouldn't form. It would result in a life-preventing or a life-prohibiting universe, not
This is an unfalsifiable claim. You can't just do that.
a life-permitting universe. The second, so that's one thing. I mean, when you think about that, and there's electromagnetism. There's just a whole host of different finely tuned parameters. There's the other thing, like the formation of carbon. So if you're a Star Wars or Star Trek or a sci-fi nerd of any kind, like me, you probably have heard carbon-based life forms, right? We're carbon-based life forms.
Yes. And I'm aware that there's like a hypothesis out there where like life forms could actually be based on silicon instead of carbon.
Right. So you've probably heard carbon life forms or carbon-based life. Carbon is a necessary element for life.
As we know it, yes.
In fact, it's the only life that we know. Carbon is formed in the core of stars when 3 helium atoms smash into one another and fuse. This is a nuclear fusion, and it happens to do. It happens because of 2 forces. They call it the strong coupling force and electromagnetic forces. If these forces were different in the slightest way, it would reduce the production of carbon in the universe, and it would prevent
I mean, a reduction doesn't mean a total loss.
a very necessary element for life. So these are 2 other forces. These are 2 other parameters that exist in the universe that are finely tuned to create the life that we know. The third thing is DNA.
What? You go from fine-tuning to DNA. Oh my god.
So, and we're going to talk a lot about DNA when we get into evolution, but if we're just talking about the fact that all life forms have DNA, the mass of a proton is 1836.15267,389 times the mass of an electron.
Okay. Good for it.
Oh, well, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. If this ratio were different by only a small amount, the stability of chemicals would be compromised.
Okay. Can I just ask why you had to give us that whole number and then say a small amount? I mean, like, you go from precision to just whatever the fuck goes.
And it will prevent the formation of molecules, including DNA, which is the building block of life.
Again, you're asserting this, but you don't have, a way of testing whether or not that's actually the case.
We're going to talk a lot about DNA and evolution and the digital code that's actually in DNA.
There's not a digital code in DNA. Oh my gosh.
That couldn't spring from by random chance. It essentially had to be
You need to define random chance. Jesus Christ.
programmed for cells to actually create proteins. But this is an essential building block, and if again the mass of a proton to an electron, if that ratio are off even slightly, it would essentially make DNA formation very unlikely.
But then again, if God's the all-knowing, all-powerful creator, he doesn't have to be like, well, he's not beholden to, well, I have to make a proton this much heavier than an electron, because if I don't, then DNA isn't going to be able to form. He can just, snap his fingers and, have anything his way.
The fourth and I think final one before we get to the video and towards the end of the class here is the low entropy. So we talked about the second law of thermodynamics, right? You can observe the second law of thermodynamics if you go to a abandoned city, right? And you see that buildings are crumbling, vines are growing.
Well, vines growing would be an increase in order because that's actually an organism building itself. But go on.
Everything's essentially tending towards disorder or chaos. So,
Remember that, like, the colloquial definition of chaos versus the scientific definition of chaos. How do I put this? Chaos in a physical sense has more to do with just how many different holders of that energy there are. So when you have like a water molecule, that's one holder of energy, but if you split that water molecule into its constituent parts, the oxygen and two hydrogens, you now have three holders of that energy. It's the same amount of energy, it's now just split apart into three different vectors or holders of the energy. It doesn't necessarily have to do with chaos as we think of it, like, a messy room, for example. It has more to do with, you know, what elements and molecules and things like that are present, what bodies are holding that energy. Order just has to do with, the energy being held up somewhere in one spot. And disorder has to do with that energy being free, being all over the fucking place.
at the beginning of the universe, um, there was a very low amount of entropy. So, if things aren't maintained, they tend to chaos. But at the beginning of the universe, there's an initial low entropy condition. So Roger Penrose of Oxford, he's an atheist, he's a physicist, he doesn't believe in creation. Put the odds of our universe's low entropy condition existing by chance at 1 times 10 to the 10 to the 123rd power. Just to give a perspective on the size of this number, the odds are in this number. If you put a 0.
I mean, you can tell me, like, the odds of whatever happening, like, the odds of any one event that, like, occurred during my day to day, astronomically low. Doesn't mean it can't happen.
On every particle in the observable universe, you still wouldn't have enough zeros to write this number out. So that's how unlikely it is for the low entropy condition at the beginning of the universe, which if the entropy condition was any higher, the universe wouldn't have formed. So that's a staggering number, and the chance that our solar system came together by random collision of particles is 1 times 10 to the 10 to the 60th power. So these are extraordinarily large numbers. We can go into a video real quick, and then I'll have some concluding thoughts, and we'll call it. We'll open it up for questions. Actually,
Do you have to go back to William and Craig? He's a fucking crackhead.
so, did it load? Yes.
From galaxies and stars, down to atoms and subatomic particles, the very structure of our universe is determined by these numbers.
So?
These are the fundamental constants and quantities of the universe. Scientists have come to the shocking realization that each of these numbers has been carefully dialed to an astonishingly precise value, a value that falls within an exceedingly narrow, life-permitting range.
I'm not even gonna, get into, where they, get this life-permitting range from. I seriously doubt that that's actually a thing. Let's see. I mean, the fact that, like, we only know of life in, like, one part of the universe tells me that, you know, maybe the life permitting range is, wider than this, and, you know, if we were to somehow change some of these, numbers, we could actually get more life. I don't know.
If any one of these numbers were altered by even a hair's breadth, no physical, interactive life of any kind could exist anywhere.
Do they, like, have anything to back this up? I mean, it doesn't seem like they are, you know, showing evidence that this is the case.
There'd be no stars, no life, no planets,
You'd need to, like, demonstrate this.
no chemistry. Consider gravity, for example. The force of gravity is determined by the gravitational constant. If this constant varied by just 1 in 10 to the 60th parts, none of us would exist.
What? How do they know this?
To understand how exceedingly narrow this life-permitting range is, imagine a dial divided into 10 to the 60th increments. To get a handle on how many tiny points on the dial this is, compare it to the number of cells in your body, or the number of seconds that have ticked by since time began. If the gravitational constant had been out of tune by just one of these infinitesimally small increments, the universe would either have expanded and thinned out so rapidly that no stars could form and life didn't exist, or it would have collapsed back on itself with the same result: no stars, no planets, and no life.
There's no way to test that.
Or consider the expansion rate of the universe. This is driven by the cosmological constant. A change in its value by a mere 1 part in 10 to the 120th parts would cause the universe to expand too rapidly or too slowly. In either case, the universe would, again, be life-prohibiting. Or another example of fine-tuning. If the mass and energy of the early universe were not evenly distributed to an incomprehensible precision of 1 part in 10 to the 10 to the 123rd, the universe would be hostile to life of any kind. The fact is, our universe permits physical, interactive life only because these, and many other numbers, have been independently and exquisitely balanced on a razor's edge. Wherever physicists look, they see examples of fine-tuning. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. If anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features that the universe has, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and unlikely. What is the best explanation for this astounding phenomenon?
Oh boy, here it comes.
There are 3 live options.
False trichotomy? I'm just
The
kidding.
fine-tuning of the universe is due to either physical necessity, chance, or design. Which of these options is the most plausible?
I don't know what they mean as a difference between necessity and chance. I mean, necessity implies design.
According to this alternative, the universe must be life-permitting.
How does that even...
The precise values of these constants and quantities could not be otherwise. But is this plausible? Is a life-prohibiting universe impossible? Far from it. It's not only possible, it's far more likely than a life-permitting universe. The constants and quantities are not determined by the laws of nature.
They are the laws of nature, Jesus Christ.
There's no reason or evidence to suggest that fine-tuning is necessary. How about chance? Did we just get really, 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 really lucky? No. The probabilities involved are so ridiculously remote as to put the fine-tuning well beyond the reach of chance. So, in an effort to keep this option alive, some have gone beyond empirical science and opted for a more speculative
They're not the only ones going beyond empirical science.
approach, known as the multiverse. They imagine a universe generator that cranks out such a vast number of universes that, odds are, life-permitting universes will eventually pop out. However, there's no scientific evidence for the existence of this multiverse.
Not the only thing whose existence doesn't have scientific evidence for it.
It cannot be detected, observed, measured, or proved. And the universe generator itself would require an enormous amount of fine-tuning. Furthermore, small patches of order are far more probable than big ones. So the most probable, observable universe would be a small one, inhabited by a single, simple observer. But what we actually observe is the very thing that we should least expect: a vast, spectacularly complex, highly ordered universe, inhabited by billions of other observers. So even if the multiverse existed, which is a moot point, it wouldn't do anything to explain the fine-tuning. Given the implausibility of physical necessity or chance, the best explanation for why the universe is fine-tuned for life may very well be it was designed that way. A common-sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super-intellect monkeyed with physics, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The heavens declare the glory of God.
And now they bring in the Bible.
The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour.
I missed an opportunity to make an inappropriate joke, but
Forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge.
So these are cool videos that I found. I've watched, I don't even know how many debates that William Lane Craig had, and while he is writing a systematic theology, and I highly disagree with him about, he's also a believer in sort of theistic evolution, which is essentially the idea that evolution occurred, but it was guided by God, that God used evolution to create man. And so, while I have some disagreements there with him, his arguments about the creation of the universe and some of these videos that he put together are really impactful. So, and I thought it was, sort of we would cap this off by saying, what does all of this mean? So, sort of in short, it is, and this is probably the understatement of the year, highly unlikely that the universe should exist at all.
all right. That's what I'm going to call it. All right. So that was their fine-tuning, whatever. The concept of fine-tuning is not a very coherent one. It's basically, well, there are these specific values for these things that we know about, and so therefore this means that it had to have been designed, which it's not a reasonable conclusion at all. So let's use some better thinking skills, and let's be a little bit less hasty about how we process the data in front of us. So with that, good night to all. I probably won't upload this video tonight. I'll probably do it tomorrow, but this has been quite a an adventure. Yay.